Me being trans is probably a trauma response.
That's interesting.
And it's not politically correct to say, don't care. And then my dad.
He was abusive, physically?
Yeah.
Maybe he needed to die so you could be safe.
Hey guys, and welcome to Mika Reacts and Reviews, where we react and review to things on the internet. Today we are doing a voiceover no face video because I'm in transit at the moment. Plus, the battery to my camera mysteriously exploded the other day, so I can't use my camera and the lighting's not great where I am. So for now, we're just gonna do this just for a little bit. But anywho, Blair White, also known as Blair Black, on her podcast is once again stirring up controversy as per usual. If you don't know who Blair White is, she is known as a conservative, right-winged, Republican, Trump supporter, tranny. I can say tranny because she calls herself a tranny, so I think that is her pronoun. I think that's what she goes by. I'm just joking. Anywho, by the way, she's said many times that she's actually not a Republican. She just has some conservative values, aka common sense. You know, when you don't think 3-year-old should be choosing their gender, you are now seen as a right-wing conservative maniac Trump supporter. And she gives the LGBTQ rainbow mafia queer community a lot of crap. And I personally believe if you truly actually love the community or the group of people that you kind of belong in anyway, that you want them to do better. So you're going to hyper focus and criticize the groups that you're in because you want them to achieve greatness. You want them to be better. But a lot of progressives, liberals, and conservatives really frown upon criticizing the groups that you're in. But again, if you truly want your group to thrive, you will criticize them. Only people that don't really care about you are yes men and kiss your fucking ass. Anywho, Blair White recently went on this sort of interview / filmed therapy session. Apparently the guy that was the therapist is like used to be an actor, but he is a certified therapist. People were saying he wasn't a real therapist because he used to be an actor, but you know. Anywho, and Blair White became very vulnerable and very emotional and let the audience into a lot of personal things about her life that she didn't reveal before. Like, Blair White has never been it's never been secretive that she didn't come from like the most pleasant childhood, but she really went into depth this time, especially with her father. I mean, she kept saying she didn't want to talk about the details of what he did, but she basically said he was a monster and incredibly abusive.
You had a bad childhood?
Oh, yeah.
What was going on in the house?
A lot. You know, I was definitely born into a lot of trauma from them, like what they had from their lives before me. I definitely had no allies growing up, let's put it that way.
Right.
I was like one bitch against the world.
Did you feel alone in your family?
Super. My dad, I don't want to necessarily say everything that he was, because I haven't been open about that with anyone on camera or even in real life yet. But he was, you know, a really bad person, you know, a really dark, damaged person. So
Was that just in his energy, or was he acting out on that?
Actions.
He was abusive physically?
Yeah, I don't want to necessarily say exactly what form of abuse, but like, you know, the kind that will give you trauma. Right. For sure.
Are you angry at all about, I mean, I guess your mom, maybe your mom, but your dad, he was abusive and...
Him I don't have any grace for. I don't really know.
Why?
Just because of the specific type of monster he was.
You know, the father is a very powerful figure in our lives as an archetype, and if we're being abused by the father and he's not there for us, creating safety, I mean, that's really the primary job of the father. Do you have any sense of like the meaning you made of that? Like, he let you down.
Oh, for sure. Worse than that, you know,
Worse
just
than
like
that.
Failure, flop, monster, evil.
If you've made it this far, can you please like, comment, and subscribe? Please donate to my PayPal so I can get a new camera battery, and you can super thanks. If you super thanks, I will mention your comment in the next video. But that's not the reason why Blair White is being talked about on the Twitters. Basically, Blair White said that she believes at least part of the reason, not the entire reason, but part of the reason why she's trans is a trauma response.
When I figured out the trans thing, and by figured out, I mean like looked within, made the decision, was comfortable with it, went on, I was like, okay, well then there's nothing else wrong with me. That was the thing that was always wrong with me. Clearly, because that's such a big thing. No one even goes through that shit, especially back then. Now everyone wants to. But you know, when I transitioned, no one even, I never knew anyone like that. Never really heard of it. So I was like, okay, then that's my big problem in life. You know, I'll move on now.
Right, it's solved.
Yeah, now I see that like, that was probably a trauma response. Me being trans is probably a trauma response.
That's interesting.
And it's not politically correct to say, don't care. That's not, you know, within the realm of what people think is acceptable to say. And some of their reasoning for that, I understand. I don't think that that is the case for every person who is trans. I don't think that's the case for every LGBT person. And it may not be the full explanation for why I'm trans in myself, but to deny that it's part of the equation, I just think is ignorant in my own case.
Right. When did you come to that realization that it was, at least some aspect of it was a trauma response?
Like in the last year or so, like I started really thinking about it, and I'm like, you know, really interesting how I escaped my hometown, escaped my family, moved away, changed my name, changed my physical appearance in just about every way I possibly could. I mean, I look nothing like I look. It's actually scary how different I look, like a shapeshifter type stuff. And I don't think that's normal, like, and even less normal than like a regular abnormal sense, because like abnormal is like not good or bad, it just deviates from normal. But for me, I was like, no, there was like something unspoken about that I'm not admitting to myself. Like, was that me running away from my past? And I think in part, for sure.
Right, right. Well, also, when our childhood is really, really scary, we don't want to be in our bodies. Like, we don't want to be in our actual bodies because it's not safe to be in our bodies. And we have all kinds of ways that we leave. And so maybe there was something about you not wanting to be in your actual body, or you wanted to change your body in some way. Does that track for you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's the full explanation.
Sure.
And that is the thing that people do not like to hear. But it is not uncommon for that to be said, even in the realm of psychology and therapy, when are not being woke and politically correct, have talked about this. You can find articles about this, papers about this, that trauma is a weird thing. It's not a weird thing, it's a terrible thing, but the way people respond to trauma can be weird, strange, and ununderstandable. Like, people don't understand sometimes why trauma manifests the way trauma does. I was severely abused as a child, and I know the trauma that I experienced manifests in a few ways. And one of the ways that it manifested was physical. Like, I have pseudo seizures. At least that's what the doctors told me. I have pseudo seizures, which is a involuntary seizure, like any seizure, like a neurological seizure, is a non-voluntary seizures or spasms of the body caused by deep-rooted trauma. It's basically the way your body is physically manifesting the trauma that you experienced. You can Google it. This is a real thing. But the other way that trauma manifests, that's not really that much of a secret, it's just not pleasant to hear, it's not politically correct to say, is that trauma can manifest in our sexuality, it can manifest in our sexual preferences, it can manifest even in our sexual kinks, right? Of course, this doesn't include everybody that belongs to that group. This doesn't mean every trans person, every gay person, every lesbian, every queer person, or everybody who is a part of a kink community is doing it simply because of trauma responses. It doesn't even include all sex workers. However, it's not that uncommon. but it's just not nice to say, and it's not politically acceptable to say it out loud. But there has been some evidence that sometimes trauma affects people, that, let's say, like a female has been sexually abused or abused for many, many years by many different men. They might choose to go with the same sex as a romantic and sexual relationship because they feel safer with that sex and not as safe with the opposite sex because they've only had trauma or traumatic experiences with the opposite sex. Or if a child is molested or touched or groomed by the same sex gender, they might manifest that by growing up and preferring the same sex. It's the same thing again with kinks. Like if you're spanked as a child, you might like being spanked as an adult. If you were abused as a child, you might like aggressive sex. It's a real thing. It's not that uncommon. It's been plenty of studies about this. So Blair White admitting that partially the reason, again, not the entire thing, partially the reason why she's trans is because of due to a trauma response to her abuse. Now she probably would have always kind of been a gay boy if she wasn't trans. Anyway, I think one of the reasons why this is a really unpopular thing to say or talk about is because trauma is bad. Trauma is icky. Some people go to their grave without ever facing their trauma because it's that traumatic. It's a big, heavy cloud. It's depressing. It gives people anxiety. It makes people want to off themselves. But being gay, being queer, being trans, or even belonging to a kink community is something that people take pride in. And in the US, or the West at least, we encourage people to take pride in that. And I'm not saying that's anything wrong with it. Even though pride is a big word, maybe just accepting who you are. But for me, it's a big word anyway, because why would you take pride in something that you didn't really do anything to do? You didn't accomplish anything. Anywho, we encourage people in the West, if you're gay, be gay and proud. If you're trans, be trans and proud. If you are a furry, be furry and proud, right? So it doesn't make sense to people. Why would I want to attach something that I'm proud of, that's a part of my identity, is part of who I am, is how I receive and give pleasure? Why would I want to attach that to something ugly like trauma? Why would I want to attach my sexuality to a memory of me being touched as a child, or me being abused as a child, or me being taken advantage of? Like, why would I want to attach those two things? That makes no sense. And if you do attach those two things, that has to mean you're not happy about being gay, you're not happy about being trans, and you're not happy about belonging to whatever kink. And of course, I'm only connecting this with sex and sexuality because I feel like that's in the realm of this. But again, I have pseudo seizures, which is a response to my trauma. Trauma manifests in many other ways outside of sex and sexuality. So even when I was watching people react to the Blair White sort of conversation, there was comments saying like, oh, Blair White is such a self-hating trans person. She hates herself, because people don't understand, if you're admitting that partially the reason why you're trans is because of trauma, obviously you hate being trans. That's not the case though. And I think it's really nuanced and complicated, and it's really hard for people to understand. If you realize that maybe I prefer the same sex because of trauma, why would you want to continue to prefer the same sex? Shouldn't you work through your trauma so then you can be cured of this and just be a heterosexual person? No, for the most part, even if someone recognizes that their homosexuality or their kink or whatever is attached to trauma, it doesn't usually stop them for then being homosexual. It just means they realize maybe what it might be rooted in, or partially rooted in, maybe not the entire reason why. And you can still embrace being homosexual, embrace being trans, embrace being a furry, and still recognize that it might be attached to some sort of trauma, and might be attached to some sort of trauma response. You can still embrace that part of yourself. You don't have to walk around in shame that might be partially a part of a trauma response. But if you do recognize that it's a trauma response, working through your trauma and healing through your trauma might dissipate that part of you naturally. You might realize, I've been afraid of men because this happened to me. Now I'm not afraid of men anymore, and now I'm willing to be in a relationship with a man. But for the most part, that doesn't happen. People don't give up their kinks and their fetishes. People don't give up their sexuality just because they realize it's a part of a trauma response. They just recognize it, work through their trauma, but still love the person that they are.
Do you have regrets?
With transition, no.
No. You're comfortable with where you're at right now?
More than comfortable. And that's actually the reason why I think people don't want to admit to themselves sometimes that maybe transition is partly a trauma response, is because they don't want to put it out there that like somehow it makes it less valid or not really them or a costume of sort.
Right.
And for me, the way I've thought about it is like, look what my body did to allow me to survive. Like the trauma response is literally a survival mechanism. That's what they are. So my body did this crazy elaborate thing and I'm still here and I'm the only successful person in my family and I'm the, only person who's even began to look at these toxic patterns they all have that I broke.
Right.
It's like to look at that and be like, that means I'm not actually Blair or something. I am Blair because I chose to be Blair.
Yeah.
And I still am Robert. I still am that person too.
Right.
I'm all of it.
I love that. I love how you just articulated that. I mean, you could make the argument that everything we're doing is a trauma response. Like what I'm doing in some way, the skills that I've developed and the interests and the direction I've gone in my life is a response to things that happened to me in my childhood.
What a shame that the world puts this stop sign in front of people who begin to question, why am I really trans? Or why are trans people really trans?
Yeah.
The amount of real conversations you can have about it in this world is almost none. That's why I get so much hate from people, because the way I feel is like, how dare anyone tell me how to talk about my own experience, how I'm viewing this thing that I am, that I have, that is me, whatever. How dare you try to limit my talk of that because it's politically inconvenient, and half the people that think it's politically inconvenient to talk about it aren't even trans themselves? Go away. I can talk how I want about my own shit. And if I come to false conclusions, then that's part of the journey. But I feel like I'm probably right about the trauma response thing. People have those real conversations in real life, but in, online and in public discourse, people act as if these conversations don't happen. And if they do, they're completely invalid. And I hate that because I'm like, there's a difference between saying things that are, politically incorrect in terms of like you're just trying to be cruel or an asshole or whatever.
That's right.
But if people are trying to have real conversations about their own bodies, how fucking dare anyone tell them not to? Because like I look at so many people, particularly in the trans community, and like a lot of them are just so lost, and then you count that now the trans community, in my opinion, isn't even really the trans community. It's not a community at all. People are thinking they're trans when they're not, because people have broadened what it means to be this crazy thing, which also dilutes people's ability to understand what they are. If I believed all the public narratives about trans, I would never come to really profound, valuable conclusions about my own life.
Also, obesity, overeating can also be a part of a trauma response. You know what I mean? And I guess that's also an example of, if you work through your trauma, then you probably put the food down and you probably take better care of your body. So again, it could gradually get you out of a certain lifestyle, understanding your trauma response, but it doesn't mean it will cure you of your gayness, your queerness, your transness, or anything like that. And they're not saying it's supposed to be cured. Anyway, this is a difficult conversation to have, and this is a conversation that people don't want to have, but it is not that uncommon. A lot of people who experience sexual trauma become very promiscuous as they get older. That's why in a red pill community, or the manosphere, instead of shaming women for being promiscuous, you probably should maybe have a deeper, more intellectual, nuanced conversation why that is, instead of just blaming it on social media and feminism all the fucking time. It's boring. Move on. Evolve. Anywho, that's it, guys. Let me know what you guys think of this video. Let me know what you guys think of the nose face thing. Again, like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell to get the notification when I do upload. All of that really does help with the algorithm, guys. And you can donate, and you guys have an amazing, beautiful day. Bye.
I love my life now. I've really become the exact person that like childhood me needed, like in many ways.